Deep inside the busy halls of the western port city of Nassau, Baron Iznik angrily asks what happens to the missing supply convoy. His subordinate trembles and gives a hesitant answer, but before he can finish, the Baron interrupts him. Reading directly from the official report in disbelief, Iznik realizes the terrible truth: every last crate is looted. His subordinate lowers his head in silent confirmation, and the Baron slams the document onto his desk with a loud crash. He angrily asks his terrified aide what this is supposed to mean and who dares steal supplies that are meant for the Count. The subordinate lowers his head even further and hesitantly explains that, according to the survivors, the attackers claim to be soldiers from House Hainel. Baron Iznik becomes furious and asks if this information can really be trusted. He points out how ridiculous the claims sound. Even on horseback, traveling from Hainel to Nassau takes at least 10 full days of non-stop riding without rest. In addition, House Hainel is already using all its strength to prepare for an upcoming siege. He refuses to believe that they would be foolish enough to send a strike force deep into hostile territory. The subordinate nervously explains that he also finds the claim difficult to understand and has checked the reports again and again. However, despite his doubts, the survivors remain completely certain. He then reveals one important detail. The warrior leading the ambush openly declares himself to be Lady Alicia's knight. Baron Iznik is deeply shocked and mutters that it is impossible. He asks how Hainel troops could cross their borders without being noticed and where they could have gone afterward. The subordinate has no answers and admits that the raiders attack like a sudden storm, burn the entire supply cache, and disappear without leaving any trace. Losing his temper completely, Baron Iznik throws the heavy report at the man's head. He screams that if Lady Alicia's name is their only clue, they must immediately send desperate requests for help to all the neighboring houses, hire ruthless mercenaries, and even recruit local bandits. He orders his aide to gather every available soldier and every piece of information and use them to track down those bastards by any means necessary. The subordinate quickly agrees and runs out of the room. Left alone, the Baron mutters that they are completely outmaneuvered and cannot believe that the North has the courage to light the beacon of war first. He stares into the distance, deeply troubled by the mysterious person known as Lady Alicia's knight. He wonders how someone like that can exist when his intelligence network constantly watches House Hainel without rest. Meanwhile, high in the rough and empty mountain passes, a western supply train slowly moves forward under the heavy weight of its cargo. One of the escort soldiers casually tells his companion that a disturbing rumor is spreading. When asked for more details, he explains that villagers in the last settlement whisper about supply convoys heading to Dharmer being attacked again and again. His companion laughs and assumes that the attackers must be their own men. However, the first soldier explains the frightening truth: their own western convoys are being attacked. A third soldier laughs in disbelief and tells him to at least make his lies sound believable. He argues that no worthless mountain bandits or highway robbers would be foolish enough to attack a heavily armed military transport, especially during wartime. He reminds them that during times like these, even the boldest thieves keep their heads down and stay hidden. He asks whether anyone has even seen one bandit along these roads. The first soldier admits that his companion's reasoning makes sense, but he suddenly stops walking. His eyes become fixed on a suspicious flare on a nearby mountain peak. His companion asks what is wrong, and the soldier points upward just as a bright ball of fire shoots into the sky as a clear signal. Before the confused guards understand what is happening, an unseen blade cuts the thick ropes holding the mountain slope above them. Huge tree trunks come crashing down with deafening force, falling in front of and behind the convoy and blocking the path while barely missing the terrified soldiers. Chaos breaks out immediately as the men realize they are trapped in a deadly narrow passage. The skeptical soldier screams in fear and curses as he realizes that it really is an ambush. The squad leader desperately tries to keep control and shouts at his men to stay calm and draw their weapons. He dismisses the unseen attackers as nothing more than a group of poor scavengers. He urgently orders his experienced knights, Woden and Marco, to run to the rear and create a defensive wall. Before the formation can be completed, Vlad rides out from the trees on his dark stallion, Noir. The famous warhorse jumps over the fallen trees and races down the path toward the squad leader. In one smooth movement, Vlad swings his sword and cuts off the leader's head before the man can even raise his shield. The nearby soldiers freeze in horror at the incredible speed of the attack. Vlad quietly thinks that something feels wrong. He wonders why the commander fails to react and questions whether these men are really knights, especially because Lamund praises the fighting ability of the Western forces so highly. Trembling with fear and anger, Juan and Marco draw their swords and shout curses at the madman while demanding to know who he is. Vlad simply looks down at them and asks if they mean him. Bright light begins to flow along the edge of his weapon, and he calmly declares that he is someone entrusted with rightful power by a noble lady. He identifies himself as Lady Alicia's knight, Vlad. At the same terrifying moment, Vlad and Noir release a huge wave of bright aura. Their overwhelming presence fills the area with deadly power. The enemy soldiers become frozen with fear because they cannot believe they are facing a master who can control pure aura. However, Vlad's display of power also serves another purpose. It is the final signal for the attack. From the surrounding rocks and forests, large groups of bloodthirsty mercenaries and northern barbarians come out of hiding. They roar that the signal has been given and order the complete destruction of the convoy. Mercenaries charge from one side while fierce barbarians attack from the other. The terrified Western guards try to defend themselves, but Vlad's ruthless companions cut through their formation like a blade through grass, killing them one after another. Juan and Marco desperately shout at the survivors to reform their ranks and stop panicking. They try to convince themselves that the enemy is small in number. Suddenly, a cold feeling spreads over their shoulders as Vlad appears directly behind them like a ghost. He calmly asks for their names and says that he should at least know the names of the men he is about to kill, assuming that two high-ranking fighters like them must be knight. The two men tremble in complete terror and weakly call him an arrogant fool. But Vlad releases another powerful wave of dark and threatening energy. His eyes glare at them as he charges his sword for the final attack together with Noir. He calmly repeats his demand and orders them to give their names before their time runs out. Far away from the bloody mountain pass, the story moves to the quiet war room in Sturma, the capital of Bayzid County. Rutiger stands before his father, the powerful Peter Bayzid, and studies the tactical map with him. Rutiger reports that their combined army with House Hainel numbers about 3,000 soldiers. In comparison, Gator commands nearly 5,000 troops and receives direct and indirect support from 6 powerful Western houses. Peter solemnly nods and says that the huge army moving north can almost be called the Western Allied forces. Rutiger asks about the position of the Iron Duke. Peter explains that the Duke promises to protect them from any unexpected outside threats, but taking part directly on the front line is almost impossible for him. Rutiger accepts this as expected and observes that dealing with the continuing chaos in the barony of Uthman must remain the Duke's main priority, especially because no one can predict what the famous Dragon Killer Knights might do next. Peter then explains the larger political situation. On paper, the conflict appears to be only a local war between Dharma and Gator. Because of this, the other northern lords have no proper legal reason to join their side. Peter privately thinks about how serious their situation is. 7 western houses are fighting against only 2 northern houses, creating an extremely unfavorable situation that almost seems as if someone secretly plans to isolate them. Yet, beneath his grim expression, Peter has a calculating smile because he knows there is a clear weakness waiting to be destroyed. He reaches out and presses his finger firmly on a specific area of the map, pointing out the unprotected rear of the west. Rutiger leans closer and realizes that his father is pointing toward the territory controlled by the neutral western houses, which have not yet pledged their loyalty to Gator. Peter confirms his son's understanding and explains that Gator is far from being the absolute ruler of the West. He compares the alliance of the 7 western houses to a fragile bundle of dry straw held together by a loose and worn-out rope, explaining that this exact location is where they will launch a devastating attack. Rutiger bows his head with grim determination and says that he is waiting for his father's command. Peter orders him to take 800 elite soldiers, march to Sora, and take control of every available vessel. From there, he must travel through the waterways to the sea and sail directly south toward their real target, the barony of his Nick and the crown jewel of the West's maritime trade, the huge port city of Nassau. Peter's voice becomes cold and deadly as he orders his son that if they cannot capture the port city for themselves, they must burn it completely and destroy it beyond repair. Rutiger accepts the order without hesitation and adds that if they succeed, this war may finally give the landlocked North the ice-free port it has wanted for so long. Peter solemnly agrees. He admits that this is not the time to boast about possible rewards, but says that this gamble may finally fulfill the centuries-old dream of their ancestors. He orders his son to complete all preparations for the march and declares that since the West has been bold enough to start this bloody war, it is only right that the North brings it to a brutal and merciless end. With his eyes filled with cold determination, Peter gives his final order, telling his son to go and fully show the terrible ruthlessness of the North to the hated usurpers of the West. After charging in and killing all the enemies, Vlad lets out a heavy sigh and complains that these men really never listen, especially because he clearly orders them to leave one person alive. He quickly dismisses the matter and mutters that it does not matter because the mission succeeds anyway. He then turns to Age and asks about the supplies. Age confirms that they gather everything together and says that all they need to do now is set the supplies on fire. When Vlad questions whether he is sure, Age pretends to be hurt and says that Vlad wounds him, Captain, before reminding him that looting and arson are the specialties of their tribe. Vlad immediately asks whether Age gets the gold coins. Age and the other barbarians freeze in surprise at the question and try to pretend that they do not understand what he means. Vlad refuses to let them escape and sternly orders them to bring over every last coin. Age turns to the other barbarians and grumbles that Vlad is worse than they are. Vlad interrupts him and tells him to stop talking and bring the loot over, promising that he will divide everything later. Age immediately becomes happy because he is thrilled that he will at least receive a small share of the spoils. Stefan joins the conversation and tells Vlad that he is truly something else, pointing out that he has never seen anyone shake down grassland bandits during the night before. Vlad casually shrugs and asks what is so surprising about it. At that moment, a crow flies down toward them. Age announces that the crow is here, meaning that their next job is about to begin. The crow lands directly on Vlad's hand with a message attached to it. As Vlad takes the note, he looks genuinely surprised and wonders how these birds manage to find him every single time. Age casually explains that crows like shiny things. Vlad stares blankly at him and asks what his point is. Age teases him by asking whether blonde hair is not shiny enough and jokes that even he could find Vlad easily if he were a crow. Vlad answers with sarcasm and remarks that someone has decided to show off his expertise. The crow suddenly makes a sharp call and interrupts their conversation. Vlad unrolls the parchment and reads the message, which orders them to follow the crow and rescue the last surviving member of Ravnoma. The scene shifts to a large military camp filled with soldiers. Inside the commander's tent, Count Gator demands clarification and asks whether Godin is seriously saying that all of this is done by one man. He lists the enormous damage, explaining that 7 supply convoys belonging to 4 different houses are attacked, all the goods are burned, and all the troops are completely wiped out. He emphasizes how unbelievable it is that one man accomplishes all of this in only 6 days. Gator gives a dark chuckle and points out that according to the report, the attacker even destroys 2 of his targets in a single day. His expression becomes darker as he realizes that this must be the same person who takes his son's sword. Godin respectfully confirms that it is true and identifies the attacker as Vlad of Sora. He explains that Vlad is currently a knight serving under Lady Alicia and adds the bitter truth that he is also the boy Jorge raises in the back alleys. Fury immediately fills Count Gator when he hears Jorge's name. He admits that he is now paying dearly for not killing Jorge that day and regrets that he does not kill even the young boy that the bastard raises. Godin lowers his head and quietly apologizes. Count Gator continues studying the situation and concludes that having a strike force operating in the heart of the West means BZ has been preparing for this. He assumes that they train these men mercilessly for exactly this moment and concludes that the bastard Peter is probably trying to buy time. Gator thinks about the situation and admits that losing the supplies is certainly a painful loss. However, they absolutely cannot allow the war to continue until winter because that is exactly what the enemy wants. He makes a decisive move and declares that starting tomorrow, the entire army will march at a rapid pace. He orders Godin to increase their speed as much as possible. Godin firmly nods and accepts the command. At that exact moment, another soldier rushes into the tent and shouts that he has an urgent report and a dispatch from the scouts. Count Gator, already annoyed, demands to know what has happened now. The soldier nervously stammers that all the bridges near the river are destroyed. Both Count Gator and Godin are shocked by the news. Gator curses the attackers as persistent pests and wonders how they manage to do this. Suddenly, he realizes something and stops to point out that the strike force should be behind them. Godin confirms this and calculates that from the location of the last raid to their current position, even if someone travels day and night, it still takes 5 full days. Count Gaidar reaches a grim conclusion and says that there must be more of these pests secretly operating inside the West. He trembles with anger while Godin looks up and observes that a heavy downpour is coming. Gaidar thinks about how convenient the rain is and realizes that if the river continues to rise and the current becomes stronger, repairing the bridges will be completely impossible for some time. He grits his teeth and reluctantly admits that the first real advantage in this war now seems to belong to the north. The scene changes to a merchant camp at night, where heavy rain pours endlessly over the area. Vlad watches the camp from a distance and asks in disbelief whether they are dealing with slave traders. Beside him, Bizid's hidden sword confirms his suspicion and explains that the West never bans the slave trade. Several other men stand with them as they look down at the camp from a muddy hillside. Bizid's hidden sword tells Vlad that the last surviving member of Ravnoma is probably somewhere down there. Vlad studies the camp and remarks that whoever they are extremely well disguised because he cannot see anyone who looks even slightly like a child of a noble house. Bizid's hidden sword dryly explains that of course, he cannot see such a person because the last member of Ravnoma is actually disguised as a slave. Vlad is surprised by this revelation. The man continues explaining that the slaves are being soaked by the rain and are simply expected to endure it because slaves in the West are treated no differently from livestock. He then explains their plan, saying that the secret unit will take care of the wagons. While they move in to rescue Ravnoma's surviving descendant, Vlad's only job is to draw the merchant's attention from the front. Vlad immediately asks how much fighting he is allowed to do. Bizid's hidden sword calmly replies that if necessary, Vlad can fight as much as he wants. A smirk appears on Vlad's face as he says that the plan sounds nice and simple before starting to move down toward the camp. One of the men from Bizid's hidden sword watches him go and expresses concern, asking whether they can really leave the mission to Vlad and his group, because they do not even seem to be trying to hide themselves. His leader agrees but points out that he tells Vlad to draw attention, not to charge straight through the front entrance. With a sigh, he admits that they simply have to trust Vlad and reminds his subordinate that Vlad is Bizid's best herder, after all. Down at the camp, 2 guards stand watch. One guard complains that the rain is pouring heavily and predicts that it will probably continue until tomorrow. He looks at the captives and nervously asks whether those people will become sick for no reason. The other guard dismisses his concern and tells him to leave them alone, arguing that if they become sick just because of a little rain, then they are not valuable goods anyway. He then curses their bad luck and complains that they have to stand watch on a night like this. His companion tells him to stop complaining and simply do his job properly. The unhappy guard scoffs and asks what there is even to watch for, arguing that in weather like this, there cannot possibly be any danger. Just as he finishes speaking, a huge bolt of lightning strikes and lights up the soaked camp, revealing Vlad standing directly behind him. The 2 guards quickly turn around, but Vlad has already prepared his attack and cuts both of them down in a single second. Immediately afterward, he signals Age, who releases a deafening roar and shouts that they are under attack. Age's battle cry suddenly wakes the entire camp. The merchants rush out of their tents in panic, shouting that they are under attack and desperately ordering everyone to wake up. Confusion spreads through the camp as they look around wildly and shout to find out where the attackers are. At that exact moment, another bright flash of lightning tears across the sky and completely lights up the camp. Standing directly in front of the terrified merchants is Vlad, surrounded by his frightening men. The merchants freeze in terror when they see the sudden ambush. As another bolt of lightning strikes and throws harsh shadows across the battlefield, Vlad calmly observes that everyone seems to have come outside and then gives his final order to kill them all.